Hey guys, it's John here. We are almost into October, which means our cool season gardening has begun. Now, here in warm climates, we typically break down our growing seasons into two main seasons, our cool season and our warm season. Our cool season is typically from October through April, all through winter and spring. And then our warm season is usually April all summer through October, with a little bit of an overlap there. Now, October can still be really warm, especially here in Arizona. We have days in the 90s all the time in October. A lot of cool season flowers can actually take warmer daytime temperatures as long as it cools down at night. Even though we can have high temperatures of 90 degrees, if it cools down into the 60s, a lot of these plants can recharge and recuperate and still be perfectly fine to plant in your garden during this time. If you're a little worried about the hot temperatures, you can definitely wait a few more weeks until it cools off just a little bit more to make sure your babies are nice and safe in the ground. And yes, you can use shade cloths as well. That's not gonna hurt your plants, but make sure you don't smush your plants when you're putting on a shade cloth if that's something that you want to do. First on this list are petunias. They are a beautiful, like disc-like flower that come in so many beautiful colors and variations. We plant so many petunias at our clients' houses just because they are so easy to care for. They are pretty non-stop bloomers. They bloom quite a bit throughout the winter season. We kind of find that they have flushes, really good flushes of flowers in the fall, and then in the late winter and springtime when it warms up just a little bit, they go through a little bit of a winter lull, but they still look great all winter and they look absolutely beautiful. We love planting trailing petunias in containers so that they can cascade down the sides of pots and look absolutely stunning. You guys know we love supertunias. We've got a ton of Supertunia Vista bubblegum and silverberry or berry silver to plant in some clients' gardens, and they're going to be so beautiful. Those are so vigorous. The one thing you do want to keep in mind with petunias is that they are heavy feeders. We do recommend a weekly water-soluble fertilizer if you're going to grow petunias, just to keep them nice and fed and looking absolutely beautiful. If you find that your petunias are getting leggy, you can trim them and they will flush back beautifully. I promise you it's definitely worth giving your petunias a little trim. I know it can be scary, but I promise the blooms that you'll get afterwards are absolutely beautiful and lush and just stunning. Next on this list is alyssum. Okay. Next on this list is alyssum. Now, alyssum is one of our favorite flowers to plant in the border of all of our gardens and even in our containers. And my personal favorite color of alyssum is white, just because it makes all of the colors behind this flower pop. The white border is just absolutely beautiful, especially at night. It kind of just gives you a line that you can see, especially if you use your garden at night. It just makes it really bright and pop. And not to mention that the bees, the pollinators, the little, I think they're called flea bees, I don't know what they're called, but the little tiny bees absolutely are obsessed with this flower. It's always covered in pollinators, which is great, especially if you want to attract those into your garden. There's also a special variety of lobularia, that's the scientific name for alyssum, that you can plant in containers that really gives you a nice effect in your container garden. I think another version of this is called white snow or white princess, something like that. But those specialty 4-inch containers that you get at the nursery, those are great because they're going to really put on a really good show for you, and you can pair those with the trailing petunias, the supertunias, to really make a nice mix in your containers. Geraniums are another great flower that you can add to your cool season garden. Now this one's a little bit more frost sensitive, especially the new growth during the winter months. So if you do get a little cold spell, I definitely would cover this one or bring it inside if you have the capability of doing so. But one of the things that I love about geraniums is that they have a beautiful leaf structure to them, like a lily pad almost, that just adds a really pretty dimension into your garden too. And some varieties have kind of like a variegation to their leaf, like a purple veining or like a ring around the leaf that is just really pretty to add into your container garden or your cottage garden, whatever garden you may have. And again, geraniums come in so many beautiful colors, from red to salmon to orange to like a violet color. They're just some really pretty ones. And there's also some trailing ones. There are some new like ivy geraniums that you can add into your container garden that will just spill out the side of your container garden, or really any garden. They're really pretty just to tuck in there. And I have seen geraniums over summer before, like in a nice shady spot. So if you have a geranium in a container, you could put it in the shade. They typically don't bloom much in the summertime, so just be warned. But they are perennial if you do want to give them a little bit of extra TLC. Sometimes if they are in full sun, I will take cuttings of them and root them indoors and then enjoy them under grow lights all summer long, and then put them outside come fall. That's a really great option for you if you want to kind of extend your blooming period with your geraniums. We also love a scented geranium. These are really great fillers. If you like making bouquets, a scented geranium is definitely a great option for you because they just have a really pretty, like, I want to say like minty scent to them. It's just absolutely beautiful. And there's some really pretty scented geraniums on the market now. One of our favorites is the Lady Plymouth. It has a green leaf with like a white margin. It's just a really pretty pop to add into any garden or bouquet. It's just a really fun flower to have, fun filler to have in your garden. One thing to keep in mind with geraniums is that they like to be deadheaded. So I don't plant a ton of them whenever I am planting them at clients' houses. We usually plant a nice pocket or, you know, a few in each container, just so that we're not deadheading them all the time whenever we're doing some maintenance. And they actually make these tiny pink blooms. They aren't really as noticeable, but again, just a really fun, airy element to add to your arrangement. Violas are a classic flower that you can plant in your cool season garden. They usually thrive when temperatures are at their coldest, especially here in zone 9. So they're usually one of the last cool season flowers that we'll plant. Usually we'll start planting them towards the end of October into November. And violas are one of those special flowers because they're just so they're just a classic flower to add into your spring garden. I remember planting these when I lived in Michigan. We would plant these in the springtime and then in the fall time as well. And they're just a really pretty flower because they almost look like they have a face to them, especially the more traditional violas. They are really pretty. For some reason, I prefer the violas and pansies can be kind of classified into the same genus, but I prefer growing violas just because I like how small the flowers are for some reason. I mean, pansies are just as pretty. They have bigger blooms to them, and they're easier to deadhead just because the blooms are bigger, but I love the violas. I don't know what it is. There's just so many different varieties of violas, and I love the smaller ones because they just I don't know, they just add a really pretty charm to the garden. One of our favorite violas is the Marina Blue. It's a Viola Sorbet Marina Blue. I know that's a lot of words, but I love the baby blue color because it's just the perfect addition to our winter and spring garden. You know, in the wintertime, we want flowers that kind of give off that wintry, icy, I don't know, like winter blues colors, I guess, but this baby blue one is just so beautiful. And we will mix them with our Dusty Millers and our cabbages just to add a really pretty winter vibe in the garden. We also love growing the Viola Antique Plum. That's another really gorgeous one to grow in your garden as well. We also love the Tiger's Eye Viola, just a really pretty striped one. That one's really cool. A lot of people ask about this one as well. There are some new varieties that we're trying as well of pansies. Again, we lump pansies and violas into the same mix in my brain, but there's this new one that we're growing called a wave pansy. This one's supposed to be a trailing one that will go in containers. So I'm so excited to try that one as well. This one that we're trying this year is the wave, the blue one, basically the same one as the Viola, but again, bigger structure, bigger plant. So we're gonna put them in bigger containers to mix in with our petunias. Because like I mentioned, the petunias kind of take a little bit of a winter break because they really bloom their best in the fall and then late winter, spring. So having like a trailing viola, I think would be a really pretty addition to mix in with the petunias to kind of give that winter interest more in like December and January. And then after that, the petunias will go absolutely crazy in the late winter and spring months. And one thing to keep in mind with violas and pansies is that you do want to deadhead them to kind of clean up the plant a little bit and to encourage blooms. So when we're deadheading, we are taking away the seed pods that will be forming so that the plant can focus more of its energy on making more flowers instead of seeds. And one more note with violas, because they're just so iconic, you can actually eat violas. So if you're looking to plant an edible garden and mix something in with like your vegetables or your herbs, violas are a great option for that. Snapdragons are next on this list. Now this is one of the iconic flowers that people love to plant every single fall, but snapdragons are named snapdragons because they can snap. They can move. You can actually play with them and you can make them talk. That's why people love growing the snapdragons. And they are so fun to cut. If you love a cut flower garden, you can grow tons of snapdragons for that. But snapdragons now come in so many different colors, shapes, and forms. There's so many different varieties than your traditional snapdragon. And when you're picking out your snapdragons, just keep in mind the kind of the purpose you want the snapdragons to fulfill when you're choosing your varieties, because there are varieties that are actually trailing snapdragons that only get about 6 inches tall. And then there's super tall varieties that can get upwards of 3 feet tall that are great for cut flowers. So kind of pick your purpose with them. So if you're looking for something more like a bedding flower that you're mixing in with like your petunias and your your petunias and your alyssums, maybe pick a mid-range snapdragon that only gets about 18 to 24 inches tall. Maybe like a sonnet snapdragon. Those would be great for that. If you're looking for a cut flower garden, snapdragon, maybe pick something that's a little bit taller like a Potomac or a Chantilly snapdragon. And if you're looking for something that's going to go in a container, or you want something to trail, maybe pick something like a Twinny peach snapdragon. That would be a great intermediate snapdragon for you. And some of these flowers are actually really, really pretty. Some of our favorites are the Chantilly snapdragon, specifically the Chantilly salmon snapdragon. This is a open face. The Chantilly snapdragons are an open face snapdragon, and specifically the salmon color is one of our favorites because it makes just this gorgeous ombre from salmon to coral, all of those sunset vibes in this flower. It is so beautiful. This is one of the early blooming snapdragons in our spring cut flower garden. So we'll typically see blooms in late February through March and into April. And another snapdragon favorite that we grow in our container garden is the Twinny peach snapdragon. Now the Twinnies only get about a foot tall, maybe 16 inches tall, but they have this like open face semi-double bloom that is absolutely gorgeous. We love adding it to our container garden for like a mid-range. We'll put our alyssum and our petunias in front of the Twinny peach snapdragons just to add a really pretty dimension into our container garden. Now I do feel like the Twinny peach ones did take a long time to bloom. They kind of bloomed a little bit later, maybe in like mid to late March. So just keep that in mind when you're planning your container garden. Dianthus is another beautiful cool season flower that you can plant in your garden. And like I mentioned with the snapdragons, you definitely want to pick varieties that you want to kind of fulfill the needs that you have. There are cut flower varieties like Amazon that are great, that get nice and big and tall, that are great for your cut flower garden. And then there are shorter ones that are great for your border garden and even your container garden. Now the thing with the different varieties is that typically the shorter varieties will bloom sooner than the taller varieties because they don't have to produce long stems. They are just producing short stems with lots and lots of blooms. So usually if you want a longer blooming period, I would pick the shorter varieties when you're growing them in your container garden or just in your cottage garden. Now, we really don't grow a ton of Dianthus in our container garden. We used to grow a ton of Dianthus when we grew and sold cut flowers. One of our favorite series for cut flowers is the Amazon. We loved the neon purple and the magic rose. Those were just two really pretty colors to have in our garden. We did tuck a few Dianthus into our container garden last spring, the purple one, and that was really pretty to have. It really bloomed all spring. It was absolutely gorgeous. The Dianthus are actually in the carnation family, so carnations, traditional carnations, actually have a light scent to them, which is absolutely lovely to have in the garden. So if you want to grow a Dianthus, definitely consider growing a lot of different varieties. And now that I think about it, we actually grew a short Dianthus in the stair-step bench last year. It was a shorter, like white one, and it made these really pretty, like mini carnation blooms all spring long, well, all winter and spring. They'll produce some blooms throughout the winter, but as the temperatures slowly start to warm up, they will produce more and more and more blooms up until it gets really hot out, once it starts to reach like the 90s, let's say. And next on this list are poppies, specifically Icelandic poppies. We grow a lot of those in our container garden. You can also grow the Oriental or breadseed poppies. I probably would recommend planting those in the ground just because those have a really deep tap root system. But today we're going to be talking about the Icelandic poppies because you can go to most nurseries and pick them up in 6 packs. And one of the most popular ones are the champagne bubbles. They make these beautiful open face blooms to them that come in shades of like salmon, gold, and white. They're really, really pretty. I would say the champagne bubbles typically have the longest blooming period from most of the Icelandic poppies because the blooms are a little bit smaller, but they produce so many blooms on this beautiful stem. They're just a really gorgeous, like typical cottage garden flower. They always reminded me of like an anime movie for some reason, just because I feel like that's the flower that they show in the beautiful field. Keep in mind, you do have to deadhead poppies. They will make a stem with a seed pod at the top. So typically we'll just cut off the stem at the base of the plant whenever we're doing that. So keep that in mind when you're planting them. Make sure that you can get in there and deadhead them wherever you're planting your poppies. And like I mentioned before, we usually do the champagne bubbles when we're planting them in beds and borders just because they have the longest bloom time. There are also these really pretty peach pastel poppies. The plants get much bigger themselves, the stems get longer, and the blooms are much bigger. And typically you'll get less blooms on these plants, but you'll get a really pretty show. We love growing these in our garden because they're just such gorgeous plants to have with really pretty statures. Again, they bloom a little bit later than the champagne bubbles, but they are definitely worth planting in your garden. And these are typically better cut flowers because the blooms last a little bit longer. Typically, if you're growing them as a cut flower, when I used to sell them to florists, you would pick them right before they open with their pods on so that the florist could take off the pod and then they would open up for them. But typically I don't use them much as a cut flower. I just enjoy them in the garden because their vase life isn't the longest, but they do make a really pretty addition to your garden. Okay, next on this list is stock. And again, stock can come in short forms and taller forms. So definitely make sure you pick the right varieties for the purpose that you want in your garden. We grow a lot of them in the container garden. We grow shorter ones in the container garden for beautiful blooms in here. And usually the shorter ones are branching, so you're gonna get multiple stems on one plant if you grow the dwarf varieties. Last year we grew this variety called Baby Rainbow, and it was the most perfect addition to our container garden. It was just a really pretty light shade of pink and white, and it was branching, and it was so, so beautiful to have in the garden. And stock is also a really good cut flower. We would grow the iron stock series a lot when we were growing cut flowers, specifically the apricots and the rose. Those two colors were so, so pretty to have. And like I've mentioned, stock is such a beautiful flower because not only is it a gorgeous line flower to add in arrangements, but it also smells absolutely incredible. It just has a beautiful heavenly scent. It smells so good. The one downside with growing stock flowers is that you only get one flower per plant, so just keep that in mind when you're growing them. We usually overplant them and really stuff plants together whenever we're doing that for that reason. And also, if you're growing them from seed or if you're buying plants at the nursery, they're usually, what the seed packets will tell you is that they're 55% double, and then the remaining 45% are singles. That just means that half of them are double flowers, and you're gonna have half the plants that are single flowers. Typically, when we're growing the stock flowers, we want them to be doubles because the doubles are just so beautiful. The single ones are just as beautiful, but not as desirable if you are looking at a florist standpoint, if that makes sense. Ornamental cabbages are another great flower that we plant. Really, it's not grown for its flower, but more so for its beautiful foliage. Now there's lots of different types of ornamental kales. Again, there's taller cut flower varieties that you can pick, or there's shorter ones that you can put in your container garden. This past year, we grew a lot of shorter varieties. I don't know the exact names of them, but we grew these shorter varieties to put in the stair-step bench, and they were absolutely beautiful. Now, 6-inch pots are a little bit small to plant them in, but they're pretty happy for most of the winter time. Ideally, you would put them in like an 8-inch pot or even in the ground. They would absolutely thrive in the ground. Now, ornamental kale loves cooler weather. It can take a deep freeze. It can take literally all of the cold weather that you can throw at it. They do totally fine. They are perfectly happy with that. So most of the time they will come in red and white, and the red is really like a dark purple. And again, the colder it gets, the more intense the colors get, because that's just how this plant works. And like I mentioned, there's so many different varieties of kale, ornamental cabbages and kale that you can grow. I kind of lump kale and cabbages in the same category just because they're brassicas. We grew this kale called Scarlet Redboar last year in our container garden, and that really gave us some height, some really pretty foliage height in our garden. Sometimes it's hard to find height in the dead of winter, so we rely on things that are not traditionally like flowers per se. So this past winter, we had a lot of the red boar kale that gave us height. We also had a lot of paper whites that gave us height too in the garden. And we'll also put a stair-step bench in the main display garden just to give us height. Again, the stair-step benches give us some nice layers that makes it really easy to put height into our garden. And one last note on the ornamental cabbages and kales, we are starting to use more of the like vegetable cabbages, not necessarily the strictly ornamental ones. You can still eat the ornamental cabbages and kales, they just don't taste as good. But there's a actual vegetable one called Ruby Red. That's just a really beautiful cabbage. And this one I feel like lasts longer in the garden too, because it doesn't bolt as late. Bolting is basically when the cabbages send out their flower. They typically signals the end of their lifespan. So the Ruby Red one does really well too. I don't really grow it for its vegetables, so sometimes if you plant it a little close together or maybe in a container, the head doesn't get as big that you would harvest for like a meal, if you will, but there's still a really pretty element to add into your ornamental gardens. Next on this list are foxgloves. Now foxgloves love to establish all fall and winter long so that they can bloom their best in the spring. Foxgloves are just a really tall, ethereal flower that we love adding to our cottage garden. It's just literally the most iconic cottage garden flower that can be blooming in the spring months. They make these tall, tubular flowers that the bees, the butterflies, the hummingbirds are absolutely obsessed with. We have caught so many bumblebees and honeybees taking naps in these flowers in the middle of the day in the springtime, and it's just so fun to watch all of the pollinators just flock towards these flowers. And the biggest tip on growing foxgloves in warm climates is picking varieties that will bloom and flower their first year. So traditional foxgloves are biennials, meaning that they grow their first year and then they bloom their second year. So they take about 18 to 24 months to actually bloom. Now, first year flowering varieties will be planted like we plant them in the fall, and then they will bloom for us in the springtime, and then they'll be done. So they are biennials in the sense that they die after they bloom. So just keep that in mind when you're planning out your garden. We treat them as annuals here in our zone. Some of our favorite varieties are the Camelot series. The Camelot lavender is absolutely stunning with that gorgeous pastel mauve tone to it. It's just so beautiful. We also love the apricot foxgloves. The Dalmatian apricot is one of our favorites, just a really pretty peachy one. I've found that the Dalmatian series blooms a little bit before the Camelot, so it's nice having a good succession of that. And then typically one of the later blooming foxgloves to bloom are the Panthers. The Panthers are a little bit shorter, but they are a nice branching variety. So this one makes a little smaller bloom structure. It has a smaller bloom structure on it, but it has a really nice branching habit to it, which is honestly really great to have. So we'll put it right below our Camelots and the Dalmatians just to have a nice tiered foxglove effect in the garden. And they also make a really good cut flower. I find that the bigger foxgloves like the Camelot and the Dalmatian are, again, gorgeous in the garden because the blooms are so massive, but they're a little too massive to have as cut flowers and arrangements. So I find that the Pink Panther is a little smaller, and it makes a really good flower to mix into bouquets and arrangements. The next one on this list is another great one to pair with all of your foxgloves. Now these are Delphiniums. These are a little bit earlier to bloom than your foxgloves, but again, it's just a really pretty tall line flower to add into your garden. The one thing I've noticed with Delphiniums And even foxgloves is they like really good drainage. So we love putting them in containers. They will get excellent drainage in there. So if you're picking a place in your yard, maybe give them a spot that's a little bit sandier. They really do quite well with a lot of drainage. Now, again, they like to be planted in the fall to establish all winter long so that they can bloom their best in the spring. We don't grow a lot of flowers that need support, but delphiniums are one of the flowers that like to be supported. We love using peony cages, especially in containers, just to give them a little extra support in the container garden. I like peony cages because the shape of the cage is circular, which matches the shape of the container, so it's a perfect combination for that. But if you have something in the ground, you can use peony cages. They actually make square peony cages, but you can also use Hort Nova netting. You can use bamboo stakes, really anything to help just keep them upright. They get a little bit wobbly and top heavy, especially if you live in a windy area or a place that gets a lot of spring rain. I definitely would recommend supporting your delphiniums in that case. And to wrap that up, I don't stake the foxgloves. They typically are pretty good without any staking with them. The foxgloves and delphiniums are toxic, so just keep that in mind, especially if you have children or small pets. I have dogs, and I have not found that they don't touch the delphiniums or the foxgloves, and they've been around them for years. They are in containers, so they're a little bit elevated out of their range, their scope of being able to access. So I've never had issues with them nibbling on any of my toxic plants. The next one is another great flower that you can plant in the month of October. This one is Feverfew, and this one's just a great one because it's just a great filler. I used to grow so much of it, you guys. I couldn't sell half of it just because I feel like Feverfew is one of those flowers that it's already at the same time. So I just remember having bunches and armloads of it in the spring months, and it was just such a lovely filler. Now, I tried to grow it for Mother's Day multiple years in a row, and I feel like it was ready every single year, the week after Mother's Day. I don't know what it was, but I couldn't get it ready for Mother's Day. It is one of those flowers that it's triggered to bloom from the days getting longer. So I feel like no matter how warm it is, how cold it is even, it doesn't really bloom until later on in May there. So anyways, Feverfew is actually in the mum family. So it has a kind of a mum scent to their leaves, but they're really easy to grow from seed. You're gonna get a ton of stems from one plant, and they are going to last a while in the vase. They're just a great flower to add into your garden. Now they do get quite tall if you let them. They can get upwards of 2.5 to 3 feet tall. So just keep that in mind. I would fertilize them a lot, and I would definitely advise netting if you want to use them as a cut flower. And I do treat this one as an annual. I know in colder places you can treat them as a short-lived perennial, which honestly, if you do shade them, they might come back the following year, but they're just so easy to start from seed, and sometimes they just don't come back as good the following year. So I always just treat them as annuals and then plant new ones in the fall. And of course, you can't forget Scabiosa. Scabiosa are their nickname is pincushion flower because it looks like needles. The seed pods look like needles have been stuck into a pincushion, like a sewing pincushion. But Scabiosas are really easy to grow from seed. And again, they come in so many beautiful colors. I love the blue one and the black one. Those just seem like the classic Scabiosa colors. And they're a really great button flower to grow in your garden, especially when the Ranunculus and Anemones are done. The Scabiosa is just a really nice focal flower to add into your bouquets if you're liking to make bouquets. They're really great. One of our favorite varieties, or I guess series of Scabiosas, are the scoop Scabiosas. Now typically if you go to a florist wholesale, you'll find scoop Scabiosas there. The flowers are a little much, I wouldn't say much bigger. They're bigger than a seed-grown Scabiosa, and they just come in so many more colors. One of our favorites is the French Vanilla, just a really nice blush addition. Now, scoop Scabiosas are not grown from seed, so you do have to purchase plants or plugs of them, but it's definitely worth it. I definitely recommend staking and supporting your Scabiosas if you do grow them. And that leads me to another really pretty spring flower. This is a Ranunculus flower. Now this is like the rose of the spring. They are so pretty, and again, come in so many beautiful colors. But I love growing Ranunculus. Like I mentioned, they kind of look like roses, but they bloom about a month or two before roses do. So it's a really good succession planting to kind of have some nice rose-like flowers in your garden from early spring all the way through late spring. Now for us, we like to start our corms in October. We have a pre-soaking process, and I will link the video. I think we have a video of that that we made last year, so I will link that down below for you guys to go check out. But we pre-soak them, and we plant them in the cell trays, and then we'll plant them out into the garden in November. But Ranunculus are just pretty easy to grow, and they overwinter just fine here in zone 9B. They don't have any issues with cold or anything like that. Some favorite varieties of Ranunculus that we grew in our garden last year are the Tango series. This one is more on the coral side. It's a little bit darker of a salmon tone, but it was so beautiful when we grew it in our garden last year. That was the first time that we grew that variety. We also loved the Wedding Pastel. This one was more of a blush like pastel tone, which was absolutely lovely. And some of these blooms were absolutely massive. Some of them were the size of our palm. And the trick to really getting some big, beautiful ranunculus is letting them establish all winter long so that they can bloom their best in the spring months. And that leads me to my next fall planted corm. This is a anemone. They are a beautiful disc-like flower, but they bloom probably one of the earliest cottage cut flowers to bloom in your garden is a anemone flower. And they have different colored centers, but one of our favorites is the white one with the black center. This one's called the panda anemone, which is kind of fun. It kind of reminds me of that panda bear, that black and the white. But this one's always a favorite with florists just because that classic white is always good for wedding work, and that black center really draws your eye to that. But another one of our favorite anemones are the violet pastel mix. This one just has a lovely mix of shades of purple and lavender and blush white. Just absolutely stunning, especially for your spring color palette. And if you haven't grown a butterfly ranunculus, those are really pretty, more spray type ranunculus. The corms are much bigger. The plants can get much taller and bigger in size than a traditional ranunculus, but there are definitely some super unique varieties of those. One of our favorites that we tried last year was called Theva. This one is a purple butterfly ranunculus, and gosh, we got so many blooms off of those plants, and they were just so beautiful. And they bloom a little bit longer than a traditional ranunculus just because they are branching and more of a spray type. They will continue to make blooms. Anemones are one of the longer blooming spring flowers that will bloom usually from late January through March, maybe into early April. Again, I would deadhead them to encourage new blooms, and if you leave them in the ground, they're actually a perennial, so that's a bonus too. And this one is a bonus one. This one is a cyclamen. Now, cyclamen are great cool season flowers for the shade. It's hard finding shade-loving flowers that can take the cooler temperatures. Now, we have a lot of coleus and begonias in our shade garden right now, but come December and January and February, when the temperatures are in the low temperatures are in the low 40s and upper 30s. A lot of those plants won't like those cooler temperatures, but cyclamen absolutely thrive in there. And not only do cyclamen have really pretty flowers to them, they actually have some really great leaves on them as well. But we love pairing these with a trailing ivy just to have a really pretty English style effect in your garden. It adds a really pretty dimension into any arrangement. Anyways, you guys, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. We have all of our seeds available in our shop down below. I'll leave the link right here for you guys. We also have live plants that are available for shipping across the United States. We have ship dates of October 20th and November 10th. So just pick a ship date based on when you want your plants. We will also have corms of all of our favorite ranunculus and anemone varieties available for you guys, so stay tuned for that. I can't wait to share them with you guys. Anyways, you guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.